Welcome to All in All. Today we're taking a deep dive into something that has a truly iconic name, but it likely brings two completely different things to mind for people today. We're talking about the Rosetta Stone. You've shared a fascinating stack of sources with us, articles, research papers, even some historical accounts, and our mission is to extract the most important knowledge and insights from all of it. We want to understand the origin, the deep significance, the ongoing impact, the evolution, and the practical relevance of both the ancient artifact and the modern language learning company that shares its famous name.
And what's particularly fascinating here, I think, is how one name has come to bridge such disparate concepts. I mean, across millennia and technologies. On one hand, you have this piece of stone from ancient Egypt that literally unlocked a lost language and civilization. It's a name steeped in history, archaeology, linguistics, even international relations.
Right.
And then, on the other hand, you have a modern company dealing with technology, education, the business of global communication, even artificial intelligence.
So what connects them?
Just the name, really, which makes it, well, ripe for a deep dive. We're ready to unpack it with you.
Okay, let's start by digging into the artifact that started it all,
Hmm.
the ancient stone itself. Where and how did this incredibly important object first come to light?
Right. So we need to set the scene. Egypt, 1799. This was during Napoleon Bonaparte's military occupation of the country. And Napoleon didn't just bring soldiers. He brought a whole contingent of scholars, scientists, engineers.
Oh, interesting. A scientific expedition alongside the military one.
Exactly. A deliberate effort not just to conquer, but to document Egypt.
Mm.
So these French soldiers were working on strengthening the defenses of a place called Fort Julien. It's near the northern town of Rashid, which the French knew as Rosetta.
Ah, Rosetta, hence the name.
Precisely. And that's where, sort of buried in the rubble of an old wall they were dismantling, they found this remarkable stone.
And what did they find? What did the stone actually look like?
Well, the sources describe it as a dark gray granite slab. It's kind of irregular in shape, about just under 4 feet high, maybe 2.5 feet wide, and almost a foot thick. It's not perfect, parts are broken off, especially at the corners on one side. But what made it immediately intriguing, even if they didn't grasp its full significance right away, was that its surface was covered with inscriptions. 3 distinct bands, clearly in 3 different scripts.
3 script. That must have immediately suggested something important.
Yeah, it instantly suggested it might contain the same message repeated in different writing systems. A potential key.
Okay, so the French find it during their occupation.
Yeah.
But it's the British Museum that has it today. How did it change hands? That feels like a crucial part of its story.
It absolutely is. And that's where the geopolitical struggle between Britain and France at the time comes right into play, as one source puts it. Napoleon's campaign in Egypt, well, it ultimately failed. After the British forces, allied with the Ottomans, defeated the French in Egypt in 1801, the stone became essentially part of the spoils of war. It was handed over to the British under the terms of the Treaty of Alexandria. That was the official surrender agreement signed between the generals in September 1801.
So it was part of a formal military surrender, a handover of significant artifacts found by the French.
According to the treaty, yes. All antiquities and manuscripts collected by the French expedition were supposed to be given to the British. But interestingly, the sources mention that contemporary accounts from people actually involved differ a bit on the exact, maybe more dramatic details of how it was specifically acquired by the British side.
Oh, like what?
Well, there's Colonel Tompkins Hillgrove Turner. He was tasked with escorting the stone to England. He claimed he personally seized it from the French general in charge, Menou. Said he carried it away on a gun carriage, ensuring its safety from maybe being destroyed or stolen by frustrated French soldiers.
A very military, decisive kind of narrative there. What's the other account?
A slightly more, maybe nuanced account comes from Edward Daniel Clark. He was a traveler and scholar who was in Egypt at the time. Clark's version suggests a French officer secretly revealed the stone's location to him and a couple of companions.
Secretly. Why?
Well, Clark said this officer feared it might be stolen or damaged. He claimed it was hidden under carpets among General Menou's personal baggage in Alexandria. So Clark says he informed the British commander, General Hutchinson, and then the stone was taken away, maybe still by Turner in his gun carriage, but the initial finding was thanks to this secret tip-off. A bit less dramatic, maybe?
So even the moment of transfer has this layer of historical intrigue, different perspectives.
Exactly, but regardless of the exact details of how it was acquired, its true significance, the reason we're talking about it now, emerged not from how it was found or transferred, but from what those three scripts actually represented.
Right, because for centuries, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics had been just an absolute mystery to the Western world. The ability to read them, which had lasted thousands of years, was lost after, the decline of ancient Egyptian civilization and the rise of other languages like Greek and Arabic.
Exactly. Entire records of history, religion, daily life completely locked away.
And the Rosetta Stone was the breakthrough.
The absolute breakthrough, because it contained the same text, basically a royal decree written in 3 different scripts. And critically, one of them was perfectly understandable at the time. You had the Egyptian hieroglyphics in the top section. These were the formal script, the language of the gods, or sacred writing, as the stone itself calls it, used mainly for religious or monumental stuff.
Okay, script 1.
Okay.
Hieroglyphs.
Then below that was Egyptian Demotic. This was a more cursive, sort of simplified script that evolved from hieratic, which itself was a cursive form of hieroglyphs. Demotic was the common script for everyday documents, legal texts, literature from around 600 BC onwards. The decree calls it the language of documents, or native writing. It actually came before Coptic, which is a later descendant language.
Right, Demotic, the everyday script.
Yeah, I've heard one.
And finally, the bottom section was ancient Greek. That was the language of the ruling Ptolemaic dynasty, the Greek rulers of Egypt, and the administrative language. And crucially, Greek was well understood by scholars in Europe at the end of the 18th and beginning of the 19th century.
So the ancient Greek provided the known key to unlock the 2 unknown Egyptian scripts, the formal hieroglyphs and the more common Demotic. That makes sense logically, but I imagine it wasn't an immediate, easy translation. There was a race to figure it out. Oh, absolutely. A huge academic effort and a real intense race. The sources highlight the famous rivalry, mainly between 2 brilliant scholars, the English polymath Thomas Young and the French Egyptologist Jean-François Champollion.
Young and Champollion.
Yeah. Both were working on it pretty much simultaneously, using copies and drawings of the inscriptions. Young was older, already famous in physics and medicine, actually, and he made important early headway with both a hieroglyphic and Demotic scripts. He identified some phonetic elements, correctly translated the name Ptolemaios inside one of those oval shapes, the cartouches.
Okay, so Young made progress, but Champollion is the name we really associate with the final breakthrough. What was his crucial realization in 1822?
Champollion's key moment, his big insight, came when he combined his growing understanding of the scripts with his deep knowledge of Coptic.
Coptic again. Why was that so important?
Coptic was invaluable because it's a direct descendant of ancient Egyptian. It preserved many of the older languages' sounds and grammar, even though it was written using the Greek alphabet, plus a few extra letters for Egyptian sounds. So Champollion used Coptic words to sort of deduce the reading of many hieroglyphic signs. His major realization, building on Young's work but going much further, was that hieroglyphs weren't purely symbolic pictures or ideograms, as people had long thought.
Right.
Nor were they just a simple alphabet like Greek. It was a complex system. Signs could represent sounds, phonetic glyphs, representing syllables or single sounds, or they could represent concepts or objects, ideograms. And often a word would use a combination of both, sometimes with a final sign, a determinative, to clarify the meaning.
Wow, okay, so a mix of sound symbols and picture symbols. That sounds complicated.
It really was. And the cartouches, those oval enclosures around certain groups of hieroglyphs, they were super important in figuring out the phonetic part, weren't they?
Extremely important, especially the one containing the name Ptolemy. Champollion recognized that hieroglyphs inside these cartouches represented royal names.
And royal names, especially for foreign rulers like the Greek Ptolemies, were likely spelled out phonetically.
Makes sense.
So by comparing the cartouches for Ptolemy on the Rosetta Stone with one for Cleopatra from another inscription found at Philae, and using his Coptic knowledge, he was able to assign phonetic values to several hieroglyphic signs. That was the definitive confirmation that individual symbols could represent sounds. That was the crucial step that let him start reading other names and eventually entire texts.
So not a simple ABC alphabet, but this complex system needing knowledge of sounds, symbols, and Coptic.
Exactly. A very sophisticated writing system. And the sources mention that famous, maybe slightly dramatized anecdote about Champollion's breakthrough moment.
Oh, yeah.
September 14th, 1822. He supposedly burst into his brother's office in Paris at the Académie des Inscriptions, shouted, "Je tiens mon affaire, I've got it!" Or maybe "Je tiens l'affaire, I hold the thing." And then promptly fainted. Reportedly stayed unconscious for days. It's a powerful image, captures the sheer magnitude of the discovery.
Definitely paints a picture.
Though it's kind of poignant, a footnote, really. Champollion never actually saw the original Rosetta Stone in person. He did all that work from printed copies and plaster casts.
Wow, that's surprising. Given his connection to it, he unlocked it entirely from afar. The sources also give us some context on the hieroglyphic script at the time the stone was created, back in 96 BCE. Was it still the main script being used everywhere then?
That's a great point, adds another layer. By the 2nd century BC, under the Ptolemies, hieroglyphs weren't really the script of everyday life anymore. As one source points out, hieroglyphs were primarily used in temples for ritual or ceremonial purposes and on big monuments.
So more formal sacred use.
Exactly. The Demotic script was the one for documents, administration, daily communication. Hieroglyphs didn't easily lend themselves to explaining complex political stuff or decrees to a wide audience. So, translating the hieroglyphic version on the stone, which was really suited for that formal language of the gods' temple context, was kind of an extra step compared to translating the Demotic, which represented everyday speech and was much more current.
So the hieroglyphic version was almost deliberately archaic or ceremonial, even when it was carved.
Yes, precisely. It was meant for a specific context, perhaps to link the Greek Ptolemaic decree back to the ancient traditions of Egypt. And it's noted, too, that hieroglyphs themselves had evolved a lot over time. They started as representing objects, then evolved to include signs for syllables, single sounds. The number of glyphs actually grew dramatically by the Greco-Roman era, maybe over 5,000 signs. So that added to the complexity Champollion had to unravel. His genius was figuring out this whole multi-layered system.
Okay, now that we understand its origin, how it was found, how it unlocked the script, let's dig into what the text on the stone actually says. What's this decree all about?
Right. The text is a decree issued on a specific date, March 27, 196 BCE. It was put forth by a synod, basically a council, of high priests from across Egypt. They'd gathered in Memphis.
Memphis. Wasn't Alexandria the capital then?
Alexandria was the center of government for the Greek Ptolemies, yes. But Memphis was still symbolically hugely important, the traditional capital of unified Egypt. And this decree was issued during a festival celebrating the first anniversary of the coronation of the young king Ptolemy V. Epiphanes. He was only about 12 years old at the time, though he'd technically been king since he was 5.
12 years old. And the sources emphasize the political context here was pretty rough, right?
Oh, incredibly tumultuous for the young king and the whole Ptolemaic kingdom. He faced massive external threats. The Seleucid king, Antiochus III, and the Macedonian king, Philip V, had basically made a pact to carve up Egypt's overseas territories. Philip had taken islands and cities in the Aegean that belonged to Egypt. Antiochus had crushed the Ptolemaic forces at the Battle of Panium around 200 BCE, leading to Egypt losing control of Syria, including Judea, to the Seleucids.
So huge pressure from outside, losing territories.
Exactly. And within Egypt, there was ongoing internal unrest. A major revolt, especially in the south, Upper Egypt, led by figures like Horwennefer and later Enquennefer, challenging Ptolemaic rule. Parts of the south were effectively independent during this period. The decree came just over a year after the king's formal coronation in Memphis, and actually 2 years after he'd suppressed another rebellion in the Nile Delta. Shows how fragile things were.
Okay, so this decree wasn't just some simple announcement. It clearly had a very strategic political purpose.
Absolutely. The sources make it crystal clear. Its primary purpose was to consolidate the young king's shaky authority and, crucially, secure the favor and active support of the powerful Egyptian priesthood, especially the high priests of Memphis. They held immense religious authority, controlled vast temple lands, and had huge influence throughout the kingdom.
And the Ptolemies, being Greek rulers, needed the priests on their side.
Heavily relied on them. Alliances with the native priesthoods were essential for the Ptolemies to maintain control, legitimacy, collect taxes, keep order. Getting the priests' backing was critical.
So what did the king offer the priests in return for this crucial support and recognition? What were the perks?
The decree lists several significant benefactions from the king. He gave substantial gifts of silver and grain to the temple's vital resources for them. He reduced taxes and canceled debts owed by the temples, which was major financial relief.
Okay.
He offered a general amnesty for prisoners, always a popular move. He provided support for important animal cults, like the sacred Apis bull, which were central to Egyptian religious life. There's even a specific mention of a really high Nile flood around 198 BCE. The king had the excess water dammed to help the farmers, ensuring good harvests. That detail made it into the decree, too, to highlight how beneficial his rule was.
Those are pretty significant concessions and actions aimed right at pleasing the priesthood and the people they influenced. What did the priests have to do in return? What were their obligations?
In return, the priests pledged their loyalty and agreed to specific actions to honor the king and legitimize his rule. They would establish a formal cult for Ptolemy V and his deceased parents, Arsinoe III and Ptolemy IV. They agreed to celebrate the king's birthday and coronation day every year with special festivals and processions.
Public displays of loyalty.
Exactly. And they were also instructed to erect statues of the king specifically titled Ptolemy Epiphanes the Eucharistos, meaning Ptolemy, manifest benefactor, or Ptolemy protector of Egypt, in temples all across the land. These statues were to be tended 3 times a day, just like the statues of the actual gods.
Wow, elevating him to near divine status.
Pretty much. And the decree also mandated that the decree itself be inscribed on stele stone slabs like the Rosetta Stone in all 3 scripts: the sacred hieroglyphs, the native Demotic, and the Greek. And these stelae were to be set up in the temples, ensuring everyone could see the king's generosity and the priest's reciprocal commitment.
So it's a very clear exchange. Royal benefits and recognition for priestly support, religious affirmation, and crucially, this public display of the king's legitimacy.
Yes, and this is exactly why the sources present the perspective that the stone, while this incredible linguistic key for us now, was also very much a propagandistic document back then. It wasn't just bureaucratic, it was a carefully crafted public relations piece made for widespread visibility. It was meant to reaffirm the young king's authority, his connection to Egyptian tradition despite being Greek, and his efforts to benefit the land, all during this incredibly turbulent time of invasion and revolt.
And the multiple scripts ensured the message reached everyone who mattered.
Exactly. The Egyptian priests and scribes reading hieroglyphic and Demotic, and the Greek ruling class and administrators reading Greek.
And this type of decree wasn't unique for the Ptolemaic period, was it? Were there others like it?
No, not at all. The sources point out that similar sacerdotal decrees from the Ptolemaic era have been found on other stelae. The Memphis decree on the Rosetta Stone fits right into this broader historical context. There are others like the Mendes decree, the Canopus decree honoring Ptolemy III, the Raphia decree celebrating a military victory, the Philae decree dealing with that southern revolt. Archaeologists actually keep finding new fragments of these types of decrees. It highlights that the Rosetta Stone's message was part of a whole series of pronouncements aimed at solidifying Ptolemaic rule through these strategic alliances with the Egyptian priesthoods, making sure their decrees were spread and publicly affirmed across Egypt's diverse linguistic landscape.
Okay, so the stone unlocked an entire language, fundamentally changed our understanding of ancient Egypt, basically launched Egyptology as a discipline. What happened to it after decipherment? How has its impact and status evolved, especially now in modern times?
Well, after decipherment, the stone became just. Absolutely crucial, foundational, really, for Egyptology. As Jennifer Westerfield notes in one source, the decipherment in the early 1820s, thanks to the stone, is usually seen as the point where Egyptology became a scientific discipline, moving beyond just guesswork to actually reading the texts. It was brought to England in 1802, and it's been on prominent display at the British Museum for over 200 years now. It's arguably one of the most famous museum objects in the world, seen by millions. For a long time, its identity was primarily as this key to the past.
But that's changing. Or being challenged.
Hugely.
Yeah.
In modern times, especially the last few decades, there's a significant and frankly growing controversy around its location and ownership. The sources talk about renewed, increasingly vocal calls for the stone's return to Egypt. There are petitions organized by figures like Monica Hanna, an Egyptian archaeologist. She describes the British Museum holding the stone as a symbol of Western cultural violence against Egypt.
Strong words.
Very. And Zahi Hawass, the former Egyptian antiquities minister, is also a prominent voice pushing for its return. He sees it as essential for Egypt's cultural heritage.
So the core argument for repatriation centers on how it was acquired, that it was taken unfairly during foreign occupation and imperialism.
That's a central argument, yeah. It's framed as a matter of justice, addressing colonial legacies. It gets called a confiscation or an act of plunder, tied up in those imperial battles between Britain and France and Egypt, and then the whole period of sort of British unofficial occupation that followed through the 19th century. From this perspective, its presence in London is part of a broader history where European, specifically British, scholarship and artifact acquisition kind of overwrote or displaced the Egyptian narrative and history of these objects. The argument is simply, this foundational piece of Egypt's history belongs back in Egypt.
What about the counter-arguments or the wider context the sources mention? Museums usually have their own perspective on these things.
The sources do try to present various facets as it's really complex. On one hand, they note Egypt, under President el-Sisi, has invested massively in its capacity to house and protect its heritage. There's a huge new Grand Egyptian Museum near the pyramids, designed for tens of thousands of objects.
Right, the G.
And Egypt has actually been quite successful recently in reclaiming thousands of internationally smuggled artifacts through legal channels. So they're demonstrating capability and commitment. But one source notes the Egyptian authorities haven't specifically commented on policy regarding the Rosetta Stone itself. Some repatriation advocates are relying more on public pressure and petitions rather than just governmental action. And then there are the broader discussions about artifact safety. You hear arguments contrasting potential risks in Egyptian museums during civil unrest, though that risk is often debated and maybe overstated with historical losses or damage during European wars or past Western appropriation and sometimes neglect. It gets complicated.
It sounds like the debate involves much more than just legal claims. It's about historical interpretation, perceptions of safety, legitimacy.
Absolutely. It gets into whether artifacts were legitimately gifted, like the Luxor obelisk given by Muhammad Ali to France, though his right as a governor to gift national heritage is itself debated in one source versus undeniably stolen. The 19th century context was just very different. Formal archaeology was just starting. Looting and tomb robbing were practiced by many, locals and foreigners alike. And artifacts like the Rosetta Stone or Cleopatra's Needles in London and New York, or even the sensationalized Unlucky Mummy, they took on entirely new lives and meanings back in Britain and Europe. Fueled by Egyptomania, nationalistic pride, displays of imperial power, these new narratives sometimes completely overshadowed or were divorced from their original Egyptian history.
Is there any middle ground being discussed, like loans or shared displays?
Yes, the sources touch on that. The practical discussion about museums potentially moving towards models that allow for return or at least expanded access. Things like long-term loans, maybe joint custody agreements, or facilitating, rotating, or touring shows of key artifacts in their countries of origin.
But that has challenges too.
Huge challenges, particularly the significant costs involved conservation, secure shipping, insurance, and the potential risk of damage to fragile pieces during transport is always a concern.
So the stone's evolution isn't just about its physical location anymore. It's about how its meaning, its ownership, its display are perceived and contested now. It shifted from just being a linguistic key to being a powerful symbol in a modern debate.
Absolutely. A symbol in debates about cultural heritage, colonial legacies, international ethics, and who gets to display and interpret the past. It's a very live, very complex issue, no easy answers, reflects these ongoing global conversations about cultural restitution.
Okay, so that's the ancient artifact, the Rosetta Stone. An accidental discovery, a linguistic key, a symbol wrapped in history, and now a controversy. Now let's pivot completely. Or maybe it's tracing the continuation of a name's legacy. Let's talk about the modern entity that shares that famous name, the language learning company.
Right. Same name, totally different origin story, totally different purpose. Helping people learn new languages right now. This company started in the U.S. as Fairfield Language Technologies. Founded by two brothers, Alan and John, with Eugene Stultzfus back in 1992. And their core idea was pretty revolutionary for the time. Teach a second language the way you learn your first language as a child. Through immersion. By associating words and concepts directly with images and sounds without relying on translation or explaining grammar rules explicitly.
And what made that possible technologically back in '92?
The sources point straight to the advent of CD-ROM technology. That was the key enabler. The CD-ROM had the storage capacity and the multimedia capability, audio, images, text interactivity that just wasn't feasible with earlier floppy disk software. So they released their first product under the name the Rosetta Stone, deliberately leveraging the fame of the artifact to suggest this was also a key to unlocking new languages.
So a tech company from the start, but one built on physical media, CDs in boxes.
Yes. And like so many companies from that era, they had to navigate a massive transformation to survive and thrive in the digital age, the age of the internet, apps, subscriptions. The sources highlight leaders like Tom Adams, who became CEO around 2003 and took them through their IPO in 2008. And later, Matt Hillett, who really spearheaded the crucial shift from being an analog CD-based business to becoming a digital-first, subscription-based company. That was a huge undertaking. Technology, business model, company culture, everything had to change.
That transition from selling a disc in a box to selling an ongoing service via subscription.
Yeah.
That must have involved enormous changes and challenges.
Oh, absolutely. Matt Hewlett described some of the complexities. From a business angle, getting investor buy-in was critical. They had to shift from recognizing all the revenue up front when they sold a CD box, getting paid all at once, essentially to amortizing that revenue over the subscription period,
Yeah.
spreading the income out over months or years. That changes all the financial metrics, needs investor education.
Right, very different accounting.
And technically, they had to completely overhaul their core infrastructure. Hollett mentioned starting with something like 5 different tech stacks, basically, different sets of code and platforms built up over years, and working to consolidate everything onto more modern, unified platforms, like using React for their user interfaces. That's a massive development effort for a seamless digital experience across web and mobile. And there was also this intense focus on optimizing the customer experience, especially refining the free trial process to get more people to convert to paying subscribers.
And didn't they do something during the pandemic?
Yeah, the sources note that during the peak of the pandemic in 2020, they offered free access to students for 3 months. Hollett saw that as part of building deeper hooks into society, adapting their business model and brand perception.
Let's talk about the core of the product itself, its methodology and features. How does the modern Rosetta Stone software actually teach languages? What makes its approach distinct?
Its core approach is still that immersive methodology, often branded dynamic immersion. It's designed to teach intuitively, supposedly like a child learns their first language. It does this by associating words and meanings directly with real-life photographic images and sounds. You interact by selecting pictures or phrases that match spoken words or sentences. It starts really simple. Picture of a child, audio boy, text boy in the target language. Then it builds systematically, introducing new vocabulary, sentence structures, all through visual and auditory cues, crucially without using your native language for translation or giving explicit grammar rules.
So very visual, very interactive, relies heavily on association, not explanation.
Right. It fundamentally weaves words, sounds, and imagery together. And this visual interactive nature is highlighted in one source as potentially making it a good fit for learners with certain disabilities, like autism or cerebral palsy, people who might struggle with traditional pen and paper or benefit from touchscreens and structured, repetitive activities.
Interesting accessibility angle.
Yeah, and some activities even focus only on listening. They'll play audio phrases or stories with no text at all, forcing you to rely just on your ears.
And one feature that seems particularly geared towards helping people actually speak and build confidence is called True Accent.
Yes, the True Accent feature. It's their voice recognition engine integrated into the program. It listens to your pronunciation and gives you instant visual feedback, usually a color-coded icon, green for good, yellow or red if it needs work. Users who liked it felt it helped them work on their accent and build confidence for real conversations, maybe for travel or just talking to people. It gives you a private space to practice speaking and get immediate, non-judgmental feedback.
Okay, so what's the overall verdict then on the company's impact and effectiveness? Does the research, does user feedback actually support the claims about this immersive methodology?
This is where the sources definitely present a more mixed, more nuanced picture. It reflects ongoing debates in language acquisition research, actually. On one hand, many individual users report positive benefits. They like the flexibility, learn at your own pace. They find it engaging, and they feel it builds confidence, especially for travel and basic interactions.
Okay, positive user experiences for some.
But on the other hand, the sources are clear. There are relatively few high-quality, independent database studies objectively looking at its effectiveness compared to other methods or, no instruction at all. And there's a significant theoretical debate about its pure dynamic immersion approach, which comes from ideas like Krashen's natural approach. The question is, does that approach really align well with how adults learn languages effectively?
Why the distinction for adults?
Because adults often do benefit from and often actively seek out explicit instruction, especially on grammar rules and structures, the natural approach typically minimizes or excludes that. Many language educators today feel that while immersion is valuable, explicit grammar teaching is a crucial piece for adults to really understand how the language works and reach higher proficiency levels.
So the lack of explicit grammar explanation in the core program is a recurring point of discussion or criticism.
It comes up a lot, yeah. In user feedback and some research, one study mentioned found that learners using Rosetta Stone struggled more with actual conversational tasks. They also used a noticeably high ratio of English words when trying to speak Spanish, relying on their native language compared to learners in traditional classrooms. That suggests they might not be developing the strategies you need to keep a conversation going in the target language or work around words you don't know.
That's a key skill.
Definitely. Participants in that study specifically mentioned the lack of grammar explanations and felt they needed some human interaction or guidance for conversational complexity. One user, quote, really captured it. You have that whole grammar and conjugation issue on Rosetta because they don't really explain it. Another said, you really need to have communication with a real person. Highlights the limits of purely self-study tech.
What about studies the company itself commissioned?
Well, one claimed effectiveness after 55 hours, suggesting users reached conversational proficiency similar to a college course. But the source points out a major limitation, huge attrition in that study.
Meaning people dropped out.
A lot of people. Only a small percentage of the initial group actually finished the study and the later assessments. So the positive findings might mostly reflect the experience of a small, maybe more motivated group who stuck with it, not necessarily the typical outcome for the average user. That Nielsen study basically found little evidence to confirm RS's claims of being superior to in-class learning, noted program shortcomings, while still acknowledging users liked the flexibility and usability.
Okay, so the takeaway seems to be engaging for foundations, vocabulary, basic confidence, maybe pronunciation with true accent. But for broader fluency, conversation, deeper grammar understanding, adults might need more, like explicit instruction and real interaction.
That seems a fair summary of the points raised. However, the sources also mentioned a more recent study looking specifically at AI-driven language learning with ESL students. That one showed some positive results for the Rosetta Stone app.
Ah, okay. What did that find?
That specific study, with English as a second language learners, found that using the Rosetta Stone app did lead to improvements in speaking proficiency across different measures like accuracy, vocabulary, fluency, pronunciation, compared to a control group. It also found using the app improved things like self-control and task persistence, suggesting the AI tools within the app can help with goal setting, progress tracking, adaptive feedback, supporting learners managing their own study.
So AI features can help.
They can, but even that study noted the impact might not be uniform across all skills and maybe didn't affect self-control related to things like speaking anxiety. So it suggests AI tools like those in Rosetta Stone can be beneficial for targeting specific skills and supporting certain learner habits, but probably aren't a complete standalone fix for everything in language learning.
Looking beyond effectiveness studies, what about the practical relevance? Where is Rosetta Stone used, and what's the bigger picture for language learning, especially with AI booming?
Rosetta Stone is definitely still relevant in several markets. Individuals use it for personal growth, travel. It has a big presence in schools through Rosetta Stone for Schools, bringing that immersive approach to K-12 and universities. And increasingly, it's positioned in the corporate language training market. That's a significant B2B space, helping companies train employees for international business or diverse workforces.
And the benefits of learning a language go way beyond just using one app, right? The sources touched on the broader value.
Oh, absolutely. The sources list numerous well-documented benefits of language learning generally. Cognitively, it can literally lengthen your attention span, improve academic performance across subjects, history, geography, literature, even math, by strengthening general thinking skills. It broadens your thinking, encourages mental flexibility, like improvising when you don't know a word, or constantly comparing language structures, and crucially, it builds connections with people, whether traveling or just in your own community.
And in the business world.
Those benefits translate into real gains. Better language skills boost job performance. A survey mentioned showed performance gains across regions and job functions for employees with improved language skills. It also links better language and cross-cultural skills to higher productivity. Citing research showing employees who feel connected at work, which language helps within diverse global teams, can be up to 25% more productive. Reducing language barriers clearly fosters that connection.
And the market itself, the digital language learning market, is massive and growing fast.
Huge, and projected to grow significantly. Sources mention compound annual growth rates, possibly between 16% and nearly 18% leading up to 2030. Globalization, more international travel, more global mobility for work and study, these are huge drivers. The demand for language skills isn't going away.
So what role does AI play in this booming market? How is it changing things?
AI is seen as this incredibly powerful tool, huge potential. But the sources stress a crucial point. For AI to be truly valuable, it needs to actually help people learn faster, better, or cheaper. And it absolutely must be integrated with sound pedagogical principles. It has to align with how people really learn effectively.
There's a risk of tech for tech's sake.
Exactly. There's a concern raised that sometimes developers or business folks building these tools might overlook or not consult enough with educators, leading to products that look slick but are confusing or disappointing pedagogically, and generic AI models like the big language models, ChatGPT and so on, while amazing for text, might not be quite right for the very specific nuanced challenges of language learning, like understanding a beginner's subtle pronunciation mistakes, even if general speech recognition is good. Solving those specific problems needs specialized AI, not just off-the-shelf stuff.
So the future isn't just AI tutors replacing human teachers.
That definitely seems to be the expert consensus, and where companies are heading. The vision is more of a seamless blend, weaving together human-led instruction and technology-driven instruction. AI can handle tasks it excels at, activating prior knowledge before a lesson, giving instant, consistent feedback on practice drills, guiding reflection, managing independent practice, helping organizations measure progress and show the ROI of language training.
But humans remain essential.
Absolutely vital. For fostering motivation, providing that nuanced cultural understanding that goes beyond grammar rules, offering empathy, giving feedback that needs complex judgment, like assessing fluency in a real conversation, and handling those higher-order interactions that build real confidence and world readiness.
So AI is a powerful assistant and enabler, not a full replacement.
Exactly. That combination seems to be the path forward. There's also a fascinating point about market shifts, partly driven by tech. These just-in-time translation tools, apps that translate speech or text instantly, they might actually reduce the need for casual consumer language learning, the kind just for basic travel. If you can just use an app to get by, maybe fewer people commit to deep learning.
Interesting. So where does that push the market?
Potentially pushes the major players even more towards that B2B corporate space, where the goal isn't just tourist phrases, but developing professional-level communication skills needed for business deals, presentations, managing international teams effectively.
And we touched on its potential as an inclusion tool earlier. That's another practical relevance.
Yes, definitely worth reiterating. Its visual, interactive, step-by-step nature, relying on non-text cues, makes it potentially useful for learners with disabilities like autism or cerebral palsy, offering maybe a more accessible pathway than traditional methods.
And looking even further ahead technologically, one source mentioned augmented reality, AR.
Yes, Matt Hewlett from Rosetta Stone specifically talked about wanting to enable more AR. He envisioned things like being in a foreign country and choosing how much you handle a conversation yourself versus how much your AR device assists with translation or prompts, or even having a virtual tutor integrated into your AR view guiding you through a real-world interaction. So companies are definitely thinking about leveraging these immersive techs.
It's interesting, too. One source mentioned some recent user pushback about Rosetta Stone removing a specific feature, a custom learning plan, from their mobile app, leading to frustration, even refund requests.
That's a really important point, yeah.
Yep.
It highlights the ongoing tension, the challenges in evolving a digital product and managing user expectations, even for a huge brand. It shows that this digital transformation isn't always smooth sailing or universally loved by existing users.
Right.
Making changes, even if intended to streamline things or improve for the majority, can really disrupt how longtime users rely on and experience the product. It's that constant balancing act. Innovation versus stability, user needs versus business strategy.
Wow. What an incredible journey through the history and the modern life of just one single name. From an ancient stone found in the sands of Egypt during conflict, providing the literal, crucial key to unlocking a lost language and civilization.
To a modern digital tool aiming to help people acquire new languages in the digital age. Leveraging technology, navigating huge business transformations, trying to connect people across the globe. It's truly remarkable how Rosetta Stone links such profound historical discovery with the contemporary challenges of communication, connection, and the future of education.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, pulling from all these sources, it leaves you with something maybe unexpected to consider.
Yeah.
Something weaving these two threads together. How does that ongoing debate about the ownership, the location, the display of historical artifacts like the original Rosetta Stone, how does that connect with the way we learn and share languages and cultures today? Does truly understanding a language inherently require engaging with the history and the cultural context of its speakers, including difficult histories of appropriation, colonial legacies, and these calls for repatriation?
That's a fascinating layer, isn't it? It moves language learning beyond just acquiring a technical skill. It prompts us to think about the cultural context, the ownership, the power dynamics, the historical baggage that can be tied up not just in ancient artifacts, but in the languages themselves and the ways we access and learn them today. Adds real depth to the idea of global communication.
A lot to think about indeed. Thanks for listening to All in All.